While looking for an empty seat, the queen took my arm and said, "Sit right next to me." The hall of the Galactic Assembly was so large that the ceiling could not be seen. It curved away into soft light like a false sky made of crystal and stars. Thousands of seats floated in perfect rings, each shaped for a different species. Some were pools of glowing liquid. Some were nests of metal and wire. Some were simple chairs, polished and cold. The human stood at the entrance, holding a small data tablet with both hands. His name was Elias Mar, though very few in the hall cared enough to learn it. He wore a plain dark suit, the kind diplomats from Earth were told to wear so they would not offend anyone. No sharp edges, no bright colors, no symbols of rank. Humans were new here. Humans were tolerated, not respected. Elias took a slow breath and stepped inside. The noise hit him first. Not sound exactly, but presence. Minds brushing against each other. Old powers, ancient histories, species that had ruled star systems before Earth had learned how to write. As he walked down the long path between the floating seats, eyes followed him. Some were curious. Most were bored. A few were openly amused. "A human," one reptilian delegate murmured to another, not bothering to lower his voice. "I thought they sent machines now." He was here because Earth had been invited, and invitations like this could not be refused. He reached the outer rings where the lesser powers sat. His assigned seat should have been here. He checked the tablet again. Seat designation, H947. He looked around. The space where his seat should have been was empty, not empty in the normal sense. The slot itself existed, but the chair was gone. Removed, as if it had never been placed there. Elias felt his stomach tighten. Mistakes happened, he told himself. The assembly was vast. Logistics were complex. He would simply find another open seat nearby and report the error later. He scanned the nearby rings. Every seat was filled. Delegates sat in silence or quiet conversation, their attention slowly shifting toward the center where the great powers waited. Sweat formed under Elias' collar. He moved along the ring, careful not to step into any space that might be claimed. Floating platforms adjusted as he passed, keeping distance from him like wary animals. Finally, he saw one. An empty seat. It was unmarked, floating slightly apart from the others. The shape was neutral, adjustable, probably a general-use chair for observers or late arrivals. Relief washed through him. He stepped toward it. Just as he reached out, the air remembered him. Pressure wrapped gently but firmly around his arm. Elias froze. The touch was not hostile. It was calm, controlled, absolute. He turned his head. The Queen of the Conquered watched him. She did not rise from her seat. She did not need to. Her presence bent the space around her, drawing the eye whether one wished it or not. Her form was tall and elegant, neither fully solid nor fully light. Crown-like structures of living crystal hovered above her head, slowly rotating. She had ruled longer than most civilizations had existed. The entire hall went silent. Her hand rested lightly on Elias' arm, not gripping, not restraining, simply holding as if the universe itself had decided he should stop. "You are looking for a place to sit," the Queen said. Her voice was soft, yet it carried to every corner of the assembly. "Yes, Your Majesty," Elias replied. His mouth was dry, but his words were steady. "There seems to be an error with my assigned seat." So did everyone else. The silence shattered. Voices rose in protest, confusion, disbelief. Seats shifted. Delegates leaned forward. Some stood, their forms bristling with anger. "A human," someone hissed. "Beside the Queen." A mistake that could end his career or worse, his species' fragile position in the galaxy. He looked at the Queen again. Her expression did not change. "Is there a problem?" she asked him gently. He swallowed. "No, Your Majesty." As Elias sat, he could feel the weight of the galaxy pressing down on him. He had never been so visible in his life. The Queen returned her attention to the assembly as if nothing unusual had happened. But everything had changed. Elias could feel it in the air: fear, curiosity, anger, calculation. The rulers of warlike empires stared at him as if he were a weapon they did not understand. Ancient beings who had devoured worlds regarded him with new interest. A small, soft-skinned human now sat at the Queen's side. The session began. Speeches followed. Reports, trade disputes, border conflicts. Elias listened, taking notes, though his hands shook slightly. He was aware of every movement he made, every breath. Several delegates tried to address the Queen, clearly hoping to draw her attention away from him. She listened politely. But when Elias shifted uncomfortably, she leaned closer. "You are tense," she said quietly, so only he could hear. "I apologize," Elias replied. "This was unexpected." "Not for me." And because humans always notice what others overlook. Exactly. Humans have stood alone against extinction more times than you have changed leaders. They adapt without permission. They survive without approval. He leaned closer, barely daring to breathe. "Your Majesty, if this causes conflict." "Something is coming." Alliances shifted in real time. Elias sat beside the Queen, a simple man in a simple suit, feeling the weight of futures he had never asked for. Far above them, unseen by most, ancient systems adjusted their calculations. The galaxy had noticed humanity, and it would never look away again. Elias sat beside the Queen, still trying to process the chaos of the assembly. The shadow creatures had vanished, leaving only a faint distortion in the air. Delegates whispered to each other, some still pale from fear, others angry at how quickly the balance of authority had shifted. The hall itself seemed to breathe, adjusting to the sudden loss and the new order that had emerged. The Queen looked at him calmly. "Do you understand why I chose you?" she asked. Elias shook his head. I don't think so, Your Majesty. I'm just a human. I did what I could. I didn't even know what I was facing." "And in your action, you showed something the galaxy rarely sees. Adaptation without expectation of reward, courage without ceremony, and a stubborn refusal to fail. Humanity has survived for millennia because of these traits, not because of technology or strength. Any human could have done what I did if they had been in the same situation. Choice is often the enemy of survival." The Queen gestured toward the data tablet in his hands. "Show me what you have recorded. You coordinated, you improvised, you survived." "Elias, humans adapt faster than any species I have observed. We will rely on your insight to prepare the assembly for future events. You will advise me." Delegates arranged themselves into new patterns, still uncertain, still tense. Elias realized that he would need to speak, to explain what had happened, and to guide the delegates on how to act if the creatures returned. He rose, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes on him. Some were curious, some fearful, some openly hostile. He cleared his throat. "The creatures we face do not respond to force alone. They feed on predictability and rigidity. Our survival depended on improvisation, on mixing groups, and on making decisions in real time rather than following strict orders. If they return, the same principles will apply." Some delegates looked skeptical, still clinging to the strength of their fleets and weaponry. Others seemed to understand, nodding slowly, recalling their own narrow escapes. A tall, armored species stepped forward, their voice deep and resonant. "You suggest that we abandon protocols, that we act without central command. In certain situations, rigid structure can be a weakness. Flexibility, communication, and trust in each other are what allowed us to survive today. Humans speak with clarity because we are unpredictable. That is all we can rely on. That is why their voice matters." He had not asked for this role, and yet it had been placed squarely upon him. The weight was heavy, but he understood now that he could not refuse. Humanity had been tested, and now he would be a bridge between species, guiding them through a galaxy that would not wait for anyone to be ready. The Queen gestured toward a holographic display that appeared above the center of the assembly. Maps, star systems, and real-time sensor readings of the distorted space showed the damage and the ongoing instability. "We will organize a network," she said, "one that spans the entire galaxy. Humans will be at its center, coordinating communication, adaptation, and response. It is not a position of power, but a position of responsibility. And it will determine whether the galaxy survives future threats. The assembly erupted into discussion, delegates sharing ideas, forming temporary alliances, and debating strategies. Elias listened carefully, interjecting when necessary to explain the human approach. Adaptation, improvisation, flexibility. He noticed that even the most rigid species began to understand that their traditional hierarchies could not address the unknown. Hours passed. Exhaustion weighed on Elias, but he refused to rest. He moved among delegates, answering questions, calming fears, and encouraging cooperation. He saw moments of humanity reflected across the galaxy, a crystalline being comforting a panicked insectoid, a warlord species shielding a smaller delegate, an avian delegate sharing data with a previously hostile race. The Queen observed silently, occasionally nodding in approval. "You are teaching them," she said quietly. "Not by force, but by example. Humans do not command through fear. They inspire through action." That example had encouraged others to step beyond their instincts, to act in ways they never would have considered before. By the time the assembly session ended, the delegates had agreed on new protocols. Emergency response teams would include mixed species units. Communication channels would bypass rigid command hierarchies. Contingency plans would prioritize flexibility over tradition. Humanity would have a permanent role in coordinating these efforts. Elias returned to his seat beside the Queen, exhausted but relieved. She regarded him with quiet satisfaction. "You have done well," she said, "but this is only the beginning. The galaxy will continue to test us. You will need to guide them again and again. And we'll be ready." It was about courage, adaptability, and the willingness to act when no one else would. Humans had endured countless hardships on Earth, and now they were proving their value on a galactic scale. Delegates began to leave the assembly hall, returning to their ships and home systems, still talking in hushed tones about the events they had witnessed. The shadow creatures had not been destroyed, but their impact had forced a new understanding upon the galaxy. Humans, long underestimated, had earned a seat at the center of this understanding. Elias watched them go, aware of the fragile alliances forming in real time. He knew that the future would demand even more of humanity, but he felt ready. Humans had survived before, and they would survive again. The Queen finally turned fully toward him. "Rest for now," she said softly. "Tomorrow the work begins anew. But today you have shown the galaxy something it has never seen before. You have shown that humans matter." The weight of responsibility pressed upon him, but it was accompanied by an understanding. Humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer marginal. They had proven themselves adaptable, courageous, and invaluable. The stars above the assembly glimmered in the fall sky, some recovering, some gone forever. But among the delegates and the humans, a new light had been kindled, a light of respect, cooperation, and hope. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, letting the realization settle in. The galaxy had tested them. Humanity had responded. And now, side by side with the Queen, he would help guide it towards survival, one decision, one action, one improvisation at a time. The assembly hall remained vast, still shimmering with energy, still filled with delegates from 1,000 worlds. Yet the space beside the Queen, reserved for a single human, was no longer empty in meaning. It was a place of trust, of responsibility, and of hope for the future. Elias took a deep breath and sat taller. He was no longer just an envoy. He was humanity's voice, a symbol of endurance and adaptability. And as the galaxy turned beyond the hall, uncertain and alive, he understood something fundamental. Humans did not need to rule to matter. Their courage, their flexibility, and their refusal to give up were enough to shape the future. The Queen's hand rested lightly on the arm of his chair. Together they watched the stars, aware that challenges would come again, but certain of one truth: humanity would meet them as they always had, with stubborn resilience and unwavering courage. The galaxy was changing, and humanity had earned its place at the center. Elias Mar, ordinary human, now extraordinary witness and participant in galactic history, felt the weight and the promise of that responsibility, and he would not falter. Tomorrow would be another challenge, another test, but humanity had survived today. And that was only the beginning. The lights of the Galactic Assembly dimmed without warning. At first, many thought it was part of the schedule. The Queen did not react, and that alone kept panic away for a few seconds. But then the soft glow of the floating seats flickered. The false sky above the hall darkened, stars fading one by one. Elias felt the change before he understood it. The air grew heavy, like a storm about to break. Around the chamber, systems chimed alarms in 100 different ways. Colors shifted to warning shades. Delegates stopped speaking. The Queen rose slowly from her throne. That single movement snapped the hall into full alert. "This is not a drill," announced an automated voice, strained and uneven. Unknown spatial distortion detected at assembly perimeter. Elias stood as well, his heart pounding. "Is this the thing you warned me about?" Several advanced species reacted instantly, their guards forming energy shields, weapons glowing with stored power. Others froze, waiting for ancient protocols to activate. Nothing happened. "No response from Central Defense," a mechanical delegate announced. "Command hierarchy unresolved. They trust systems more than instincts." Several guards moved toward her. She lifted her hand. "No," she said, "not yet." But he had grown up on a world where disasters did not wait for permission. "I'd get people moving," he said, "away from the threat. I'd stop trying to fight it head-on until we understand it." "You cannot be serious." She stepped aside from her throne and gestured to Elias. "Begin." "They won't reach you in time." "They're responding to patterns," Elias realized. "They're going where things are predictable." The shadow creatures hesitated, movements slowing as their targets became harder to predict. Weapons fire erupted from one of the war empires. Brilliant beams cut through the hall, striking a creature directly. For a moment, hope flared. Then the creature absorbed the energy and grew denser. "Stop firing," Elias shouted. "You're feeding it." The creature surged forward, overwhelming the attackers. Elias felt sick. He turned to the Queen. "We need a barrier, something simple, physical." The creatures slammed into them and recoiled, confused. "They don't like things that don't think," Elias murmured. The Queen's eyes widened slightly. "Interesting," she said. Alarms continued to blare, but now there was direction. Mixed groups moved together, helping those who struggled. A massive armored species lifted smaller delegates without hesitation. Old enemies shared space, driven by survival. Elias moved among them, shouting instructions, adjusting plans as conditions changed. He made mistakes. He corrected them. He did not stop. At one point, a shadow creature slipped through a gap and surged toward the Queen. Without thinking, Elias stepped in front of her. He raised a simple metal table, torn free from a nearby station. The creature struck it. The table bent, glowed, and shattered, but the creature recoiled, screeching in a soundless way. It did not pass through. Elias fell backward, breath knocked from his lungs. The Queen caught him before he hit the ground. "You did not have to do that," she said. "Yes," he gasped. "I did." "They are learning," she said, "but so are we." Delegates stood among wreckage and empty spaces where others had been moments before. Loss hung heavy in the air. Elias sank into a seat, exhausted. He had never been so tired in his life. The Queen remained standing, surveying the hall. "Today," she said, her voice carrying without force, "you survived because you abandoned certainty. You survived because of a human." Darkened sections were repaired with temporary supports. The false sky above slowly returned, stars flickering back into place, though some lights never came on again. Those missing were not forgotten. Elias sat on a simple bench near the Queen's throne, his suit torn, hands still shaking slightly. He had been offered medical assistance many times. He had refused. He needed to feel the ache in his muscles. It reminded him that he was still real. Around him, delegates spoke in low voices, not arguments, conversations. Species that had never shared space before now stood together, replaying moments of survival. Old enemies exchanged nods instead of threats. The queen watched it all. "You see the difference," she said quietly. Elias followed her gaze. "They're not asking who's in charge." Elias hesitated. "You may sit," she said. He nodded and took the seat, feeling its shape adjust around him once more. It no longer felt like a trap. It felt like responsibility. The queen rose. "What happened today was not a victory," she began. "It was a warning. This threat feeds on certainty," she continued. "On rigid thought, on systems that repeat themselves until they are consumed. Humanity did not defeat the enemy with strength," she said. "They did not use superior weapons or ancient knowledge. But they practice it without realizing its value." And then you continue. "Not ranked by age, power, or territory. Not rulers, not commanders. Some reluctantly, some eagerly, history shifted. After the session, the hall slowly emptied. Delegates departed not in rigid formations, but in small, mixed groups, still talking, still learning. Elias remained seated, staring at the open circle symbol as it faded. "I didn't ask for this," he said softly. "No one who matters ever does," the queen replied. He looked up at her. "What happens when we fail?" Human diplomats listened more than they spoke, then asked the one question no one else dared. "What if we try something different?" Elias stood once more in the assembly hall, older now, lines at the corners of his eyes. The queen sat beside him, unchanged, watching the stars. "You are still looking for empty seats," she said. He smiled faintly. "Someone has to." Humanity helped it survive, and that was more than enough.